Salam Namaste. Welcome to the Gita Motivation. My dear friends, wish you very happy Bhagavad Gita Jayanthi. On this occasion, I would like to discuss a brief history of the scripture, 4 misconceptions on the scripture, and also the essential message, the core message of the scripture, how it is relevant to us today, especially to our youth and children. Before that, the purpose of this channel is to improve communal harmony and the feeling of national brotherhood and also decrease religious polarization. I would invite you to join me in this journey by clicking subscribe button and also turning on the notifications bell. Bhagavad Gita is known to be taught to Arjuna by Sri Krishna Paramatma. It has 700 slokas, 1400 lines, probably the most concise information on reality of life, society, and the Supreme Creator. Considering the depth of message it gives, 1400 lines or 700 slokas are really is a very concise information for the broadness of the message it gives. That's what makes it a very unique scripture. How old is this scripture? There are varied theories on this very concept. There is no one unanimous agreement on how old this scripture is, and in fact, no one knows the exact age of this scripture. According to Janine Flower, a prominent Hinduism scholar, this scripture belongs to the 2nd or 3rd BCE, that is approximately 2300 years from now. However, Kashinath Upadhyaya, he thinks the scripture definitely belongs to 5th century BCE because some of the quotations from the scriptures is found in the literature around that period, 5th century BCE, that is 2500 years from now. Interestingly, according to Winthrop Sargent, linguistically, the classical Sanskrit that is used in the scripture was prominent around 1 century BCE. So the scripture might have been orally transmitted until 2nd BCE, and it came in a written book form during that period, that is 2200 years ago, but the scripture itself existed 3000 years, around 3000 years from now. Regardless of what the theories are, we can safely conclude that this is one of the most oldest scripture that is existed today and that is also in use today, which is widely read and practiced in society. That makes it a very unique scripture. Having said all this, the popular notion and also popular belief is that today Bhagavad Gita completes 5158 year. So wish you very happy 5158 Bhagavad Gita Jayanti, regardless of what the theory says, because we actually don't know the exact date of the scripture. It is definitely an older scripture, ancient wisdom, and it is also relevant today. That's important point. So the 4 misconceptions on the Bhagavad Gita. Number 1, it is a religious scripture. Bhagavad Gita, widely known as a religious text, but a careful study of the scripture suggests otherwise. It doesn't talk about any of the religious practices, religious rituals, religious methods, things like yajnas, yagas, or muhurats, mannats. None of these exist in the scripture. So Bhagavad Gita is more of a philosophy book than religious book. The only religious aspect Bhagavad Gita talks about is the logical argument it presents on the existence of Supreme Creator. I will explain in a minute why it is very important part of Bhagavad Gita wisdom. Before that, number 2, it is a book about war. So most people believe that Bhagavad Gita is revealed during the war, and it talks about war and how to win a war through some magical powers. That's what we often see in television series and movies of Mahabharata as well, where Arjuna enchants few mantras. He learns few mantras from Sri Krishna, enchants those mantras, and uses those mantras to use bow and arrow and create some magical powers and win the war. That is just a mythical portrayal of the scripture. It is unfortunate, but Bhagavad Gita is not about war. It is not about winning a war. It's actually about winning in life. It has all the principles to achieve success, fulfillment, and winning attitude in life. Misconception number 3. It is not relevant for us today. Although many people don't say it loud, it is a general perception, general understanding that Bhagavad Gita is some ancient religious text and it is not relevant today in our life, except for a part it plays in our religious aspect of our life, in temples or in performing rituals. That's it. That's the role of Bhagavad Gita. That is a very general perception which we often see. It is a very sad fact. Bhagavad Gita is very relevant today because it talks, because the principles that are taught in the scripture help us achieve success and fulfillment. Those principles are created around human nature. So far, human being existed, no matter how much scientific technological transformation society sees, how much transformation human being sees, the knowledge is relevant as far as human being exists because it is created around our very core nature. It is a manual for human being, you can say that. Misconception number 4. Only pundits and spiritual gurus can understand the scripture. This is unfortunately widely spread notion that only pundits, spiritual gurus understand the scripture, or you have to dedicate your whole life to understand the scripture. There is so much secret in the scripture and you cannot just open it, read it and understand it. This notion goes completely against the statement of Sri Krishna Paramatma in the 9th chapter, 2nd verse. This is a royal knowledge, a supreme knowledge, a purifier. It's a purifier of spirit, purifier of soul, purifier of our attitude. And this knowledge is realized by direct intuition. It means you can understand it very easily. You can read it and understand it. It is realized by direct intuition. It is based on your very nature. And he goes on saying it is very easy to practice. That also makes my argument stronger, that if it is easy to practice, it means it is easy to understand, and also it is indestructible. In my practical life, I realized it myself once I started reading the scripture. Initially, the literature feels very strange because it is so different from our academic books. But once we get used to the literature of the scripture, it is very easy to understand and very easy to implement, very logical, and more than anything else, it is very practical. You can easily apply those principles in your life and see a result for yourself. So these are the 4 major misconceptions about the scripture. So if all these notions are wrong, if Bhagavad Gita is not a religious text, if it doesn't talk about magical powers, if it is not outdated, if it is relevant today, what exactly it talks about? That comes to the point, the core message of our scripture, why it is relevant to our youth and children, why we should be teaching them this scripture today in this age and time. Bhagavad Gita, the whole entire message of the scripture revolves around 3 fundamental principles. Number 1, self-awareness and self-realization. It talks about the principles to achieve self-realization, understanding the reality of life, understanding our emotions, understanding our purpose, managing our emotions very effectively, understanding the idea of cause, the work and result, and how we can achieve all the qualities which we need to achieve success and fulfillment in life, and all the values that we need to experience spirituality, peace and happiness, joy in our life. Those are the things that are discussed in this segment of Bhagavad Gita, and self-realization is a major portion of the scripture. Majority of slokas talk about self-realization. Number two, building relationships with people. This is often not noticed very openly, not talked about very openly, but Bhagavad Gita has a great emphasis on building relationships with people. It talks about the reality of society, how society functions, how people function, different attitudes of people, how we can manage our relationships, how can we build and also manage relationships very efficiently and effectively, and how this is going to make us personally as well as socially successful in our life, and how managing effective relationships is going to bring fulfillment in our life. All these principles are discussed in this under this subject. And number three, connecting with Supreme Creator. Interestingly, according to the scripture, connecting with Supreme Creator does not mean performing rituals, performing religious prayers, or some religious practices, going to temples, offering prayers, or singing bhajanas. None of these, according to the scripture, is again, it comes back to the first 2 points. If you have become self-aware, if you understand yourself, if you connected with yourself and and connected with your inner spirit, and then you're connected with people, develop strong relationships with people on a spiritual level, you are already in connection with Supreme Creator, because these two are rather hard to achieve. But to experience fulfillment and also divine energy, we must have this objective to become self-aware and also connect with people, to develop relationships with people. That's when we can experience the divine energy. Nothing more or nothing less. Less is more, a proverb that is widely known, and interestingly, Bhagavad Gita is an embodiment of this proverb. It has only 700 slokas, very easy to read. It takes a couple of days to finish the entire scripture, but a lot of time to understand. That's why less is more. That's what makes it a unique book, because the lots of depths, deep concepts, deep philosophy is discussed in such a concise and short way. That's what makes it very beautiful. So my dear friends, finally, I would request you to start reading the scripture on this occasion of Bhagavad Gita Jayanti. Make an intention to read the scripture, read it logically, read it like an academic book, like a lifestyle guide, not like a religious text. That's when you will find a great motivation in the scripture. You will find all the principles that will help you overcome some of the most complex challenges you are facing in your life, and also the principles to achieve success and fulfillment in your life. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. Jai Hind.